Okay, so the next step in our Jamestown mini Q is going to take us to page 53 of your packets, and we're going to be looking at understanding the question and pre-bucketing. Pre-bucketing will be at the bottom. We'll get to that in a moment, but every mini Q that we do is going to have an understanding the question and pre-bucketing page in which we're going to basically attack the analytical question. If you look at question 1 at the top of page 53, question 1 asks us, what is the analytical question asked by this mini Q? And since this is one of the first mini Qs that we're doing this year, it probably will benefit you to hear that this question, what is the analytical question asked by this mini Q? It's always, always, always going to be the title of the mini Q that we're working on. So for this particular mini Q, if you went back to the front page, the analytical question asked by this mini Q is early Jamestown. Why did so many colonists die? The second question on page 53 asks us, what words in the question need to be defined? And what this is asking you basically is what words in the analytical question need to be defined. Now that seems like kind of a simple question, but let's look at the title of the mini Q. Let's go back to the front page of the mini Q and take a peek at the title. The title of the mini Q is Early Jamestown. Why did so many colonists die? Now, question 2 asks, what words in that question need to be defined? You look at it and you think, well, most of those words are pretty simple. I would think, though, that there's always going to be at least one word that we really have to pin down on question 2 to determine the definition of the word. And I would say here that the word that we really need to pin down would probably be early. We're talking about Jamestown, but we're talking about early Jamestown. Early meaning when? 1950? 1410? What's the time period that we're talking about here that makes early a meaningful word to have to define? And if you look at the timeline that we looked at on the previous exercise, the timeline is giving us some important dates that occurred in the area, in the time period that we're talking about with respect to Jamestown. So very, very important to understand what words in the question need to be defined. And the word that we really have to understand here in this mini Q is the term early, when it refers to early Jamestown. And the third question that's always going to be asked when we're on the understanding the question in pre-bucketing page, the third question is always going to be asking you to rewrite the question in your own words, including dates. So in this particular mini Q, early Jamestown, why did so many colonists die? Take a moment to look at the title of the mini Q, which you can look at from your analytical question up here, question 1, and rewrite the question in your words to include dates. Dates are going to help us understand the time that we're talking about when we refer to early Jamestown. So before you go on to the pre-bucketing, I'd like you to take a couple of moments to rewrite the mini Q question in your own words using dates. Okay, now that you've got understanding the question down and you've answered questions 1 through 3 above, I'd like you to spend some time working on the pre-bucketing, which is basically going to be an exercise that's going to help us answer the questions or the question that is being asked by the mini Q. If you look at the instructions here on our pre-bucketing, it basically is saying, using clues from the mini Q question, think of logical analytical categories and label the buckets. So what is our mini Q question? Our mini Q question is early Jamestown. Why did so many colonists die? So when we talk about pre-bucketing, we're talking about labeling these 3 buckets down here with names that are going to kind of help us pre-bucket our documents once we start looking at our documents in the next step. So what I would like you to do for now, and this is just going to be for the pre-bucketing exercise, using clues from the mini-Q question, think of logical analytical categories and label the buckets. So what you should be asking yourself is, what is the mini-Q question asking you? And using that question, label these 3 buckets. Pause for a moment, and then when you play back, when you turn the player back on, we'll have an answer for you with respect to how I would label the buckets. All right, so you've thought about it for a moment. You've looked at the mini-Q question, and you're thinking of what might these logical analytical categories be. The thing to understand is that the question, the mini-Q question, is basically calling for reasons. So in this pre-bucketing exercise, why don't we each, if you have not done this already, why don't we each label our buckets reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3. And once this is done, we're going to begin examining the 5 documents that are contained in this mini-Q.